Now to take a look at our first gross pay example. This employee is paid an hourly rate of $9.50, so clearly we're way above the Fair Labor Standards required minimum wage, so you don't have to worry about that. It says, what is the gross pay for a week in which the employee worked 50 hours? So notice the 50 hours, that is in excess of that 40-hour work week that we talked about. So this one is going to involve overtime. So the first step in the calculation is we will just simply take the initial 40 hours that were worked and multiply that by the hourly rate of $9.50. That gives us $380. Then we need to figure out an overtime rate. Well, the overtime rate is going to be based upon 1.5. Now remember, we said that unless we're told otherwise, we assume that they adhere to the bare minimum overtime of 1.5. So the extra 10 hours that the employee worked times 9.5 times the extra 1.5 gives us $142.50. And then we add that to the original $380 to get a total gross pay of $522.50. So that's our first example of dealing with overtime. Now sometimes we actually have to do a conversion of rates. If you look at this example, this employee earns $412 for a 40-hour work week. What is their gross pay for a 45-hour week? Well, the problem here is this is an overtime situation because they worked 5 hours of overtime when you look at the 40-hour traditional week. But how do we calculate that? We don't know their hourly wage. And the reason is the information was given to us in an odd way. They gave us the total that the person normally makes. So whenever we have an example like this, we just have to do a little bit of a conversion. We will convert the information given and put it into the format that we really need it to be in. So it's not going to be really that different from the last example that we worked. We're just going to have to take an extra step. So the extra step is to take this $412, that information was given to me, and divide that by 40. Because it says they normally earn $412 for a 40-hour work week. So if I do that conversion, that tells me that their hourly wage is actually $10.30 per hour. So once I know that, then I can figure out the overtime rate. That $10.30 an hour times 1.5 means that they will earn $15.45 for every hour of overtime. That overtime rate times the 5 extra hours is $77.25, and then we tack on the initial $412 for a total of $489.25. So that's a similar example, but just slightly more complex because the information was not given to us in the traditional format. Now in this case, this example involves a salaried employee, but this employee is salary non-exempt. See, we need to know that status because remember, if a person is non-exempt, that means they will be paid for overtime. Now under normal conditions, they receive a monthly salary of $3,200. So the question is, how much would they receive for every hour of overtime? So they're not really asking us to calculate the gross pay. What they really want to know here is, what is their overtime rate? Well, in order to get that overtime rate, I need to know the hourly rate. And I don't know that because this is a salary. So again, I'm going to have to take the information given and convert that information. So I will take that monthly salary of $3,200. I will multiply that by 12 months. That gets it into an annual format. Then I will divide that answer by 52 to get it into a weekly format. And then I'll further divide that answer by 40 to get it into an hourly format. So a person who makes $3,200 salary per month really makes $18.46 per hour. And once I get that per hour rate, I can then multiply that by 1.5, and that gives me 27.69. So for every hour of overtime that salary non-exempt employee worked, they would earn $27.69. So it's really just a matter of understanding those pay periods and being able to convert the information that we've been given. Now this example is a piecework example. And in this case, an employee receives 25 cents for every unit completed. And remember, we said this is generally seen in manufacturing positions. In a typical week, this person has completed 2,000 units. So the question is, what is their gross pay? Well, yes, it's a typical week, but many times people are paid every 2 weeks. So if that's the case, in 2 weeks, they would actually complete 4,000 units, and at a quarter per unit, that's $1,000. Here's a commission example. See, we're just trying to show you all the different possibilities on gross pay. An employee receives a weekly salary of $1,000 plus 5% commission on sales. What would be the gross pay in a week where they had $1,500 in total sales? So like we said before, these commissions are designed as a motivating factor to motivate the employee to sell. So they're going to get the $1,000 for sure, but they're going to get that commission over and above that. So we take the sales that they had for the week of $1,500. We want 5% of that. Now to get that calculation, I need to have that 5% as a decimal. So the decimal equivalent of 5% is 0.05. So that means a $75 commission. And when that's added on to the original salary, their gross pay would be $1,075. Another option would be to have a profit sharing plan. A lot of businesses offer these plans in order to reward their employees and also in order to motivate them. The idea is that the more successful the company is, then the individual employees will profit from that and their salary. So that will be a constant encouragement for them to work harder and to make good decisions for the company. Now, once we calculate gross pay, and that is what we learned how to do in this particular lecture, that's only a very small part of the overall payroll responsibility. As important as the gross pay is, that's actually just a starting point, because then we have to take that gross pay and then take it through all the various deductions. So in the next several lectures, we're going to be talking about all the various deductions that will eventually reduce that gross pay, and ultimately we will be able to take it from a gross pay all the way down to a net pay.